Good morning.
Must be much more forceful.
Can we please ask everyone to come to order? Please take your seats.
Please take your seats.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here with us today. Distinguished delegates, may I draw the attention of all delegates in the room? May I draw the attention of all delegates in the room? We are about to commence the session of the Environment Assembly. Distinguished delegates, I call you to order. We are about to begin the session. All delegates have to be in their seats so that the Assembly can commence its proceedings. Distinguished delegates, including those standing at the back, please take your respective seats. The Assembly is about to begin its proceedings. Yes, sir.
Good morning to all. Honorable ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order the third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Pursuant to Resolution 2/22, the present session of the Assembly is being held on an exceptional basis for 3 days as we transition to an odd-year cycle. In accordance with established practice, I invite all representatives to stand and observe 1 minute of silence dedicated to prayer or meditation. I wish to personally dedicate this moment to the late Buri Mohammed Amsa, our friend and colleague, Minister of Environment of Somalia, who since our last assembly in 2016 fell victim for a barbaric act of terrorism. I also dedicate this minute of silence to those environmental rights defenders who have sacrificed their lives to protect their community's right to live in a pollution-free environment. Thank you. I would like now to turn your attention to the provisional agenda for the third session of the Assembly as contained in UNEP/EA.3/1. May I invite the Assembly to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in EA.3/1? I see no objections. I declare the agenda adopted. Before we proceed with our agenda, I wish to take this opportunity to acknowledge with appreciation the months of hard work and cooperation by my colleagues in the Bureau of the Assembly and the Committee of Permanent Representatives in preparing for this session. I would also like to thank the Secretariat for its excellent support under the leadership of Jorge Laguna, under the guidance of the Executive Director Eric Solheim and Deputy Executive Director Ibrahim Tiao. I wish now to invite your attention to the organization of work as presented in the annotated agenda UNEP/EA.3/1 and the revised scenario note UNEP/EA.3/INF/1/Rev1. In accordance with Rule 60 of the Rules of Procedures of the Environment Assembly, I propose that the Assembly establishes a Committee of the Whole to assist the Assembly discharge the consideration of various items of its agenda. I see no objections. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 62 of the Rules of Procedure, I would like to invite the Assembly to consider electing the Chair and Rapporteur for the recently established Committee of the Whole. For the position of the Chair, the Bureau of the Assembly, with the support of the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, has nominated Mr. John Matusak of the United States of America. Are there any objections to this nomination? I see none. Mr. Matusak of the United States of America is duly elected as the Chair of the Committee of the Whole. The rapporteur. El apellido?
Sinclair.
For the position of the rapporteur, the Bureau nominates Travis Sinclair from Barbados. May I take it that the Assembly is in agreement? I see no objections. Travis Sinclair is duly elected as the rapporteur of the Committee of the Whole. Thank you. I count on all of us to extend our full cooperation and goodwill to the Chair and the Rapporteur of the Committee of the Whole so that they can complete the significant work assigned to them. I wish to inform all delegates that the Committee will meet immediately after the consideration by the Assembly of Agenda Item 4, Report of the Committee of Permanent Representatives in Conference Room 1. Now let me turn the attention of the Assembly to the allocation of items of its agenda. I propose the Assembly that the Assembly allocates the consideration of Agenda Item 7, International Environmental Policy and Governance Issues, to the Committee of the Whole. The intention of this proposal is to allow the Committee to expeditiously prepare and finalize for the consideration by the Assembly of any outstanding proposal. I see no objections for this. It is so decided. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, before we move to our next agenda items, I propose that the Assembly welcomes the more than 2.3 million pledges made so far by individuals from all countries of the world who have signed the Beat Pollution Pledge to take actions to reduce pollution. Every one of us should be able to live in a clean environment. We have gathered today at the third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly to work towards a pollution-free planet with political, scientific, private sector, and civil society leaders. Everyone has a responsibility to act in her or his own life and her or his own sphere of influence. As ministers responsible for the environment, we cannot overstate the need for rapid, large-scale, and coordinated action against pollution. In this regard, I am very pleased to invite two young citizens of the world to present on behalf of more than 2 million individuals the People's Pledge to Beat Pollution. May you join me in welcoming these two young citizens of the world to the stage. Van a hacer un mensaje.
A very good morning and warm greetings. My name is Juliet Grace Luede. I'm 23 years old and I'm from Uganda. This is my friend and sister, Nicole Booth. She's 8 years old and she's from the US. Together we are pleased to present to you over 2.3 million pledges that were signed by people from all over the world to beat pollution. Why I took this pledge is because of the hope that it restores within me, knowing that I and my friends are going to be living in safe environments and safe communities. Where I come from, every morning my heart is broken and sinks because I am greeted and smiled at by litter that was disposed overnight. Me and my friends are exposed to various health risks, and because we do not know what steps to take, we often don't know what to do about it. But today I am happy and pleased to know that me and many of us here are taking the first steps to address poor waste disposal and management, and that together, me and my friends will live in safe and healthier communities. Thank you very much. Together, we beat pollution.
This reads, I want to live on a pollution-free planet. I will make changes in my own life to contribute to a cleaner world. I call on those who gather for the Third UN Environment Assembly to take bold actions to eliminate pollution in all its forms. 2,393,038 pledges on web and social media as of 4 of December 2017. Thank you, Nicole and Grace. We hope that we, the representatives of the people, remain accountable to leave a better planet to you and to our future generations. I have the pleasure to deliver my opening remarks. No, I have to take this. That's for small people. Let me put this. His Excellency Miroslav Lajcak, President of the United Nations General Assembly, distinguished Mr. Eric Solheim, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, distinguished ministers of environment and head of delegations, distinguished representatives of major groups and stakeholders, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start with a few words of thanks because we would not find ourselves at such a gathering without a great deal of effort from a great many people. The hospitality of the President and people of Kenya has once again been exceptional. The organization by the United Nations Environment Programme and the United Nations Office in Nairobi have been exemplary. This year's UN Environment Assembly is climate neutral. All your flights, hotel stays, conference, resource, and taxi usage are being measured and offset. In addition, the use of plastic bottles has been avoided, and registration badges are made out of recycled plastic and can be reused. Through the uses of the UNEP app and electronic document sharing, UN Environment Assembly is paper-friendly, saving some 0.3 tons of paper. Also, thanks to member states and the major groups and stakeholders, our process of preparation has been transparent, inclusive, and open. And the effort of the members of my Bureau and the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives have been generous twofold. I am confident that the same commitment and spirit of cooperation that brought us to the starting gates of the third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly can now carry us toward a pollution-free planet. It was a courageous decision to defy expectations and focus this assembly entirely on pollution. It sends a strong message that we desperately need the world to hear, that our health and wealth is at risk from virtually everything we eat, drink, and breathe. For too long, economic growth has been at the expense of this planet and its people. Many people benefited from industrial development. Now too many pay the price. In the U.S., families like the Kellogg's move across the country so their children can breathe without having an asthma attack. In major cities like London, Paris, or Beijing, children walk streets that fail to meet WHO safety limits. In Sarajevo, schools like Fatima Unique have children raising flags to measure pollution. In Colombia, children like Maria's son will grow up around artesian gold mines handling raw mercury. Around the world, 1.7 million young children will continue to die every year from such pollution. With all the incredible things humans have achieved, surely this is not the legacy we want to leave behind. But many, many more people of every age, gender, faith, and culture will continue to suffer from the damage to our natural resources and ecosystems unless we act now, with the most vulnerable in society paying the heaviest price. Industrialization, food production, uncontrolled chemicals, and waste, overconsumption, and lack of education all contribute. But this is a problem we created, which means it is also a problem we can fix. With up to 13 million people a year dying and countless more left sick, disabled, poor, orphaned, or displaced, it is due time we do so. However, much our opinions differ on the details of how best to change that. I believe every single person at this assembly agrees that we must. That business, as usual, is not an option, and that it is imperative to prevent, reverse, and recover from the pollution of our land, water, food, ecosystems, and atmosphere. We are all responsible for making that happen. Scientists are responsible for anticipating threats and opportunities, making that information available and understandable for decision makers and monitoring their impact. Governments are responsible for shaping regulations, policies, and enabling conditions to promote the best scientific knowledge, business practices, and consumer habits. Businesses are responsible for adopting the entire life cycle of their goods, from concept and design through material sources and production to deliver and disposal or recycle. Financiers are responsible for moving to longer-term profit strategies and pricing structures that reflect the true value of our goods and services, including their impact on natural resources and human health. Consumers are responsible for the journeys and investments they choose to make, the messages they choose to send to politicians, and the products they choose to buy, use, and throw away. NGOs and civil society organizations are responsible for helping to identify those most urgently in need of the solutions and the practical options for scaling them up rapidly and efficiently. And the United Nations is responsible for convening all those stakeholders to deliver that progress on a truly global level in a way that no other single organization can. In fact, it is a cruel irony that the people least responsible for pollution and the least able to access safe food, water, or shelter are the ones most affected by the choices made by the rest of us. And we do have plenty of choices available. With all the technically, practically, and commercially viable solutions that exist to treat, control, and avoid pollution, surely this should only be a question of where and how the best use of them. In the last few days, I have been able to speak with many people from many different backgrounds who are determined to ensure that the right choices will be made and fast. The energy and goodwill at the Science, Policy and Business Forum, the Innovation Expo, and the Global Business Forum was something very special. This gives us every reason to be positive that this assembly can deliver something equally special, something that reflects the will of governments, industries, and citizens moving towards a more efficient and inclusive circular economy, something that will inspire action at every level, and something that meets or exceeds the expectations of nearly 2.5 million people who signed the bid pollution asking for change. So reaching agreement on the resolutions before this assembly is not enough. We need a credible route to deliver them and to move towards a pollution-free planet with the participation of all and leaving no one behind. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have the pleasure to invite my friend and fellow minister, Her Excellency Dr. Yuri Wakungu, Minister of Environment, Water, and Natural Resources of Kenya, to deliver her opening statement. Minister Wakungu.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. The President of the General Assembly, the President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, Honorable Ministers, Director General, UNON, Executive Director of UNEP, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to welcome you all to Kenya for this third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 3. On behalf of the government of the Republic of Kenya and the people of Kenya, I express our gratitude and honor to host this universal gathering for the third time in Nairobi, Kenya. I congratulate the Executive Director of UNEP as he engages in his very first session of this assembly, and I assure him of our full support. I have every trust in your leadership to move the organization forward. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this session, Towards a Pollution-Free Planet, could not have come at a better time. You all appreciate that as we strive to develop and provide better services to our citizens, pollution has equally increased. It is time the world addressed this challenge without delay and agree on a common goal. We all appreciate that a pollution-free planet cannot be achieved in isolation, and this is a strong reason for us to work together on this matter. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya has achieved several milestones in addressing pollution in its totality. Effective August this year, the country took a bold step and banned the manufacture and use of plastic bags, which are major contributors to pollution of our planet. It is my belief It is my sincere belief that although it is a small step, the ban will significantly contribute towards reduction of plastic-related pollution in the country. We are appreciative of your messages and support and encouragement during our enactment of the ban. We were very encouraged by your support. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, recalling the Rio Plus 20 outcome document, The Future We Want, the summit committed itself to strengthening the role of the United Nations Environment Programme as the leading global environmental authority that sets the global environmental agenda and promotes the coherent implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development within the United Nations system, and serves as the authoritative advocate of the global environment. Kenya remains committed to strengthening and supporting UNEP to achieve this noble goal. Equally, I urge UNEP to work towards strengthening the headquarter functions in the spirit of the Rio Plus 20 outcome document. We request your support to achieve this. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that in the next 3 days, you will be in a position to show leadership that complements and uplifts the important work being done elsewhere. I urge you to speak for us. I urge you to speak for the world on this critical agenda. The environment is our responsibility. It is the source of our well-being. The fate of our world depends on the quality of the care we give it. As I conclude, I again urge you to find the time and sample our rich natural heritage by visiting our parks and experiencing Kenya's warm hospitality. I wish us all fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wakungu. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Eric Solheim, the Executive Director of UN Environment Program, to deliver his remarks.
We humans are different, so. Karibu, welcome to Nairobi, welcome to Kenya. I really hope that all of you also will get some time to explore these fantastic, beautiful nations. Just don't only stay inside here. This is one of the most beautiful. Kenya is for sure, I mean, there are competitors, but Kenya is for sure one of the most beautiful nations on planet Earth. Now Kenya has had rain, so it's green. You have the most spectacular wildlife anywhere in the world. So please make sure that you have some opportunity to also explore Kenya, not just discuss all the environment matters. Let me then also start by recognizing the presence of some of my old good friends. Miroslav Lajčák, now the President of the General Assembly, long-time great Foreign Minister of Slovakia. Judith Congo just spoke, but what she did not say, at least not as clear as I will say it, she is the woman. She's the person behind the ban on plastics in these nations. Sure, she needed the support from President Kenyatta now, but she's the woman. And it's so inspirational. What also is so good to see, people of Kenya support it. There were a lot of uncertainty that people come around supporting this. Then Salehwerk Sevde, my good friend and good compatriot here at the UN compound. She's the head of UN in Nairobi. I may also add, she's hiding over there, but Patricia Espinosa, the head of UN Climate Convention, coming back from a very successful climate convention in Bonn, which really set the world on the target to implement the Paris Agreement, and where even new nations joined the Paris Agreement. Thank you, Patricia. Then let me take you to Washington, D.C. Right before Barack Obama left office as the President of the United States, I listened to one of his speeches in Washington. He said, "My 2 young daughters, Malia and Sasha, has never heard about acid rain." When I started speaking about acid rain, which was, by the way, the main environment issue when I came to adulthood, they closed their eyes and go somewhere else, into internet or somewhere else, he said. Why is that? Well, the problem of acid rain is resolved. There is no acid rain anymore in the United States of America. And by the way, in my nation, Norway, for 100 years, from 1900 to 2000, we had no salmon in the rivers of southern Norway because of the acid rain of pollution. Now salmon is coming back into our rivers. Come and visit. Kenya first, but come later to Norway and see, if you're a fisherman, see this beauty of the salmon. That's, of course, because the Germans and the Brits and so many other European nations stick to what they should do and fought against acid rain. There is a lesson to be learned from this. What drives change? And that, I think, what we should make our kind of call also from this meeting. I think when government takes the lead, visionary leadership, when business find the practical, new, innovative solutions, and when civil society and citizens push all of us to change, that's when we get change. And that's also how I see UN Environment. And I will set out a few issues for you here, which are not directly related to pollution, but it's an opportunity for me to speak to many of you, also to get the corrections if you think we're on the wrong path. UN Environment has a lot of technical expertise on basically any environment issue. But I take the view that unless we link that up with the demands from the high level of government in your member states, we will fail. I just spoke with the Environment Minister of Algeria. She set out the priorities on the environment of the government of Algeria, and we will try to deliver and assist her in her endeavor. Because the world is so big, we cannot do everything. We can only be successful under the leadership of governments. If you don't want us to do something, let's go somewhere else. Let's have that in mind for whatever we do, government leadership, but us bringing global expertise, global presence, platforms for what you want to do. Secondly, without the innovation of business, we will fail. And I've set out to completely change the way we work with business, much more open, much more a dialogue, and relating to business in all parts of the world. Here in Kenya, we have made partnership with Kenya Airways, with Safaricom. In China, we are partnered with Ants Financial, the biggest company in the digital finance sector in the world, with Build Your Dreams, the biggest producer of electrical buses in the world, with Mobike, the biggest company in the bike sharing industry, which you can see outside here, and so many other companies. Moving to India, we have made a partnership with India Business Chamber, with NABARD, the big development bank of India, and with many other Indian institutions. In Saudi Arabia, we made a memorandum with the Riyadh Business Chamber to set out how Saudi Arabia can make the change from completely dependent, or at least very much dependent on fossil fuels, into more renewables. In Europe, we are partnering with Rabobank, with BNP Paribas, with Covestro, and I can go around the globe like this. But let's partner with business, and particularly, of course, with those businesses to drive the change into the future. And finally, there's no way we can do without citizens, without civil society organizations, with all those strong networks and individual civil society organizations fighting for the environment. But if we want to engage with citizens, we need to change the language of the United Nations. We cannot speak an abstract, inward-looking language. We cannot continue to use any number of acronyms. We need to set out the environment in emotional, appealing terms. We need to drive environment home. Unless we can do that, we will fail. And I think we are on the way to do it. The Secretary General of the United Nations is also taking the lead on this effort in the entire UN. The UN, by the way, needs to reform. Please support the efforts by the Secretary General for reform of the UN. The bureaucracy is unbelievable. Both the bureaucracy we have created here in Nairobi and even more so the bureaucracy created in New York, these must change because we are using the money of your people. We want to change the world to be more environment friendly and to bring everyone out of poverty, then we need to be more effective. And then we need to support the reform agenda of the Secretary General. We have set out this event to focus on pollution, the big aim of a pollution-free planet. But let me use this opportunity to mention a few other areas where we really also want to drive change. Because tomorrow I will have the opportunity to speak to you on pollution. One is environment security. There's a strong linkage between wars and conflict on one side and environment degradation on the other side. It's not a one-to-one simple connection. There's a strong connection. When environment degrades, the likelihood of conflict and wars is bigger. Take neighboring Somalia as an example. 1 million people has gone into the cities of Somalia very recently, forced there by Al-Shabaab terrorism, by the war, by the drought caused by climate change, and by the environment degradation in that nation caused by the charcoal trade. All this comes together. It's very hard to distinguish. That's why we need to join hands to fight it together. We have linked up with 3 governments, but we are ready to link up with others, with the government of Somalia to look into the charcoal trade and how we can provide an energy system which is better for Somalia and for the government, with the government of Iraq on how we can handle the enormous havoc to the environment caused by ISIS or Islamic State or Daesh, as they will be called in Iraq. They put fire to oil wells. They released chemicals out into the nature. They simply fought the people of Iraq, yes, by killing people, but also by destroying the environment for the people there, because that was a mood of war by Daesh. And now time has come. Daesh is crushed, thank God, as a fighting force in Iraq, as a conventional fighting force. Government of Iraq is regaining control, but then we need to help people to come back to the villages and towns, and then we need to fight, for instance, the enormous contaminated debris in the big cities like Mosul, which need to be removed for the city to regain its historical value and fantastic beauty. And finally, with the government of Colombia, which has had a very successful peace process with the FARC, but for instance, which has huge amount of mines because of the lawlessness there, where there is an enormous mercury problem hitting the population. So we'll work with these governments and with the accredited peacemakers of the UN to see how we can bring the environment dimension more into conflict resolution. Secondly, we want to work much more on finance. Without green finance and without the big financial institutions going green, we will fail. Quite often in the UN, we focus on the small money. Small money is the money of the UN, which we do need, or the money of aid, but the big money is in the private sector and investment. And we need to focus on that if we want to drive a green development. So now we have the financial inquiry, we have the financial initiative, all about how do we make sure that stock exchanges, national banks, finance ministers, all those who command the financial sector, make the world greener. We've also set out a financial facility starting in Indonesia where some big banks like BNP Paribas and Rabobank in Latin America come in with big capital, but we will then look into how that capital can benefit the small-scale farmer so that they can improve their productivity and thus not destroy the forests of Indonesia, for instance. We started that in Indonesia. We are now trying to take it to India. We'll do it in Latin America. And of course, the aim is also to do it at this continent, to look into how the big finances can spend the money on the small people. That's what we need, and it's not easy, but for sure I'm sure we will manage to do it. And finally, we need to work much more determinedly to protect this beautiful planet, the wildlife, the nature. This is so nice. This planet is so blue, so white, so green, so fantastically beautiful. It is also vulnerable. As we all know, it's the one planet we have. We need to take much better care of it. That, for instance, means how can we much more protect all the species and the wildlife? How can we find the economic incentives for that to happen? Because if people see an economic benefit of protecting a national park, they will do it. Judy is the first to speak about this, how mobilizing the people of Kenya to protect the wildlife is the only way forward. In Rwanda, they have a national park called Vulcan National Park with gorillas. Protection of gorillas has been fantastic. They now take $1,500 per person to see the gorillas for 1 hour. But of course, it's an enormous income generation mechanism for everyone around. All the taxi drivers, all the guides, all those working in the hotels and the shops, all those benefit from it and are the first to protect the gorillas. So it's a huge economic benefit for Rwanda, while at the same time a fantastic good thing for protecting the beauty of this planet. And let's look into these kind of solutions at a much, much bigger scale. I think we can apply them many parts of the world. So this is my message. We are working on many different issues, all of them with a focus on citizens' action and how we can make people enthusiastic, all of them with a government leadership focus, and with business, we need all three of them. Let me finally thank a few people. I'm very confident that this Environment Assembly will be a big success. But if so happens that it becomes a big success, that is because of the enormous hard work of so many people in UN Environment. It's also because of the very hard work of many ambassadors, negotiators, people from Capital, and so many people here in Nairobi. I cannot single out everyone, but let me at the end single out two persons which deserve particular thank. One is John Moretti, the very capable ambassador of Botswana here in Nairobi, has been the president of the Committee for Permanent Representatives, and the other is obvious, Edgar Guterres, sitting here, the president of the UN Environment Assembly. Both of them have a few characteristics which are the common. Both of them are absolutely determined to work for a better planet and environment. Without that inner spirit, you get nowhere. Both of them are very calm, very inclusive, want to listen to everyone. Without that, you get into big trouble. Both of them are decent human beings at the core, and I think that characteristic we should never forget. And both of them have this wonderful humor that when you get into a little bit of problems, maybe if you are a little bit humorous, we can get more easy out of it. So thank you so much, Edgar, and thank you, John, and thank you, all of you, for coming. And I think we are set for a successful, very important assembly where we will really bring home to the people of the world the need to fight pollution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Solheim. Next, I'm honored to invite His Excellency Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, President of the 72nd session of the UN General Assembly, to deliver a statement.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for inviting me to address you at this third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. And I want to start by acknowledging the leadership of His Excellency Edgar Gutierrez, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica and President of this Assembly. I also want to pay tribute to His Excellency Erik Solheim, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. Furthermore, I thank the government and people of Kenya for welcoming us so warmly in Nairobi and for their ongoing support to the work of the United Nations office here. Excellencies, when it comes to the environment, we are at a crucial moment in time. It is a moment of great danger because the risks posed by the climate change and environmental degradation have never been higher. However, it is also a moment of great opportunity because international commitments to reducing these risks have also never been higher. This was evident through the adoption of ambitious frameworks, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement. It was also evident at this year's General Debate of the United Nations General Assembly, during which we heard a record number of references to climate change and sustainability. So we must see this as a crucial moment for action. We must harness the opportunity to mitigate the danger, and we must use our commitments to lessen the risks. This is what participants of COP23 called for in Bonn, and this is the only way that we can move towards a sustainable and pollution-free planet. And I want to make 4 main points on this today. The first is that we cannot talk about the environment without also talking about people. Overall, humanity has reached record levels of well-being. This has benefited only some of us, but it has damaged the environment which belongs to all of us. In this way, as many of us have begun to live better lives, the planet's capacity to support us has been eroded. From the trends we have seen, we can say 2 things for certain. 1, this could get even worse. There are roughly 83 million people being added to the world's population every year. More people means more demands for resources, such as water, food, and energy. This will put unprecedented strain on the environment. However, population growth will not be the only aggravating factor. If our overall lifestyle and consumer patterns continue as they are, environmental degradation will accelerate. And 2, by hurting the planet, we are hurting ourselves. The World Health Organization has estimated that nearly a quarter of all deaths worldwide came as a result of living and working in an unhealthy environment. This September, we learned of the human suffering that was caused by the Hurricane Irma in the Caribbean. Last year, we saw the horrific effects of consecutive droughts on people in East and Southern Africa. And now, according to the UNEP emissions gap report, our pledges are not enough to keep the global temperature below 2 degrees as we committed to, or 1.5 degrees as we aspire to. This means that even more people are likely to suffer from these kinds of severe weather conditions. The way we are living has further risks, both to the environment and to ourselves. That is because climate change and environmental degradation is also affecting livelihoods. Farmers have seen land which previously provided both food and income turn to desert. Coastal communities have seen more and more fishing boats returning to land empty. Climate change is being felt along the supply chain, across borders, and at all levels of society. This means that the progress we have made in reducing global poverty is under serious threat. We can see this trend acutely when it comes to pollution, which is my second point today. Again, we cannot talk about pollution without talking about people. We are the main culprits. We are the ones allowing 80% of the world's wastewater to be released into the environment without treatment. We are the ones causing 4.8 to 12.7 million tons of plastic to enter the ocean every year. It is our policies and practices which have led to 2 billion people living without access to solid waste management and 3 billion others without access to controlled waste disposal facilities. And again, we will be the ones to suffer. Air pollution is causing roughly 7 million deaths annually. Children are dying from preventable diseases caught from contaminated drinking water or poor hygiene practices. Our biggest resource, the ocean, is becoming a dumping ground for plastic, chemicals, and other waste. Pollution is also hurting us through its economic effects, including productivity losses, healthcare costs, and damage to ecosystems necessary for livelihoods. This is why I'm grateful to the United Nations Environment Assembly for focusing on pollution for this year's session. This brings me to my third point, which relates to the major role played by the United Nations Environment Programme and its Assembly in combating these trends. This Assembly is the world's highest level decision-making body dedicated to the environment. It is fitting, therefore, that Africa acts as its home. This continent has witnessed some of the most brutal effects of climate change. These effects have been felt by Africa's land, water, and importantly, people. However, Africa has also produced some pioneering efforts in relation to the environment. We have seen examples of green innovations, efforts to improve environmental governance, and best practices in shared resource management for conflict prevention. This year, we have gathered in Nairobi to adopt a ministerial declaration which will help to lead us towards a pollution-free planet. The pledges that have been made by many of you will kickstart this journey. But a pollution-free planet will not come about only through political will. We will need action. We will need smart solutions. And we will need cooperation. This brings me to my fourth point, which is a call to action. This is the kind of action that cannot be taken alone. Pollution is global. Yes, it can start unilaterally. It only takes one person in one small part of the world to pollute the land, air, or waters around them. But this will have ramifications for people and countries miles away. If we are to truly combat pollution, we must therefore make multilateral commitments, and we must turn them into multilateral action. We need education and outreach strategies so that people are aware of what pollution is doing to their lives and their environments. We need to clean up the pollution that has already occurred and help those who are already suffering from adverse health conditions because of it. We need tighter regulations of waste management. We need investment in environmentally sound technologies so that economic growth does not have to come at the expense of our planet. We need new local, national, and regional policies and laws. Unfortunately, it will not be easy to do any of these things. They will demand money. They will demand expertise. They will demand new technologies. They will demand pooling of capacities and experiences between partners, from government ministries and regional organizations to civil society, academia, community leaders, and the private sector. Partnerships and multilateralism lie at the core of our journey towards a pollution-free planet. And as the main multilateral body on the environment, UNEP will be the leader of the pack. Excellencies, when we think of pollution, we think of plumes of smoke coming out of factory chimneys. We think of oil spills and illegal fishing trawlers. We think of landfill sites which stretch for miles. However, we should also be thinking about people. It is people who are driving demand which leads to these activities. And it is people who are suffering because of the pollution they cause. Like I said, we are in a moment of great danger and a great opportunity. People created the danger, and people must harness the opportunity. You are all here as leaders and decision makers, but you are also here as people who can drive this change, and I hope you will. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your presence here demonstrates the high political importance that member states have for the Environment Assembly, and we look forward to engaging with the General Assembly on the outcomes of the present session. And now I'm pleased to invite Ms. Sahele Work Seude, Director General of the UN Office at Nairobi, to deliver a message from Mr. Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, Miroslav Lajcak, we're very happy to have you here, sir, which also concludes your visit of the 3 offices away from headquarters, which is UNON. Your Excellency, Professor Judy Wahungu, Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, Minister Edgar Guterres, my dear friend Eric Solheim, Executive Director, United Nations Environment, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations community here in Kenya, I'm very pleased once again to welcome you to the United Nations office at Nairobi for the 3rd session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, and I'm privileged to have attended the previous 2 UNEA sessions. I wish to assure this Assembly that UNON will continue to do its utmost to service and support the United Nations Environment Programme and strengthen our partnership with the program as it pursues its mission to advance global environment agenda. This gathering is taking place at a time when the United Nations is embarking on a set of ambitious reforms proposed by the Secretary General, and I would like to echo what Eric just said in calling for this support. UNAN is playing an active role in the corporate reform of the SG with the goal of strengthening Africa's place in the United Nations and the United Nations' place in Africa. To do so, we need, among others, to improve and modernize this beautiful compound of ours, which gives you a glimpse what Kenya can, this amazing country that we proudly call home, can offer. So I would really invite you to visit this amazing compound. And this proposal includes, in fact, replacing the very first office blocks that were the temporary office when UNEP moved in more than 40 years ago. I now have the distinct honor of delivering the message of Secretary General Antonio Guterres to the 3rd session of UNEA, which reads as follows. We have the right to live in a clean environment. We expect to be able to eat, drink, breathe without risking our health. Yet we continue to pollute our air, land, waterways, and oceans. We trigger sand and dust storms due to climate change and environmental degradation. We use dangerous chemicals and substances in everyday objects. We inflict global suffering that is unexcusable, preventable, and reversible. Dedicating this assembly to working towards a pollution-free planet highlights the urgent need for rapid, large-scale, and coordinated action by leaders from governments, industry, the scientific community, and civil society. it also highlights the incredible opportunity to promote equitable and sustainable social and economic development. Beating pollution will help reduce poverty, improve public health, create decent jobs, address climate change, and protect life on land and sea. We already have much of the knowledge and technical solutions we need to prevent, mitigate, and manage pollution. There are many examples of countries, cities, and businesses taking action. And there are international successes, such as the entry into force of the Minamata Convention on Mercury and the recent announcement that the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol will enter into force on January 2019. Having obtained the required threshold of 20 ratifications. With stronger policies, regulations, laws, and fiscal incentives, we can scale up such progress. Making our planet pollution-free is a long-term necessary endeavor. The world counts on this assembly to show strong leadership by sounding the alarm and calling on all governments to act to beat pollution. End of quote. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ms. Selde. I wish now to invite the Assembly to bid farewell to Her Excellency, Dr. Yuri Wakungu, Mr. Eric Solheim, Ms. Saleh Work Selde, and His Excellency, Mr. Miroslav Lajczak. Thank you very much. I invite now the regional and political groups that wish to take the floor to do so. Given the time constraint, I urge the representatives speaking on behalf of these groups to please limit their statements to 5 minutes. The first on my list is the group of 77 and China. I invite head of a delegation of Pakistan to address the Assembly, please.
Mr. President, honorable ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to speak on behalf of the group of 77 and China. The group commends the hard work that has gone into organizing UNEA 3 as an extraordinary event, and that too back-to-back with open-ended committee of permanent representatives. In this regard, synergy between the UNEA and CPR bureaus, as well as the Secretariat, ably led by the Executive Director, Mr. Eric Solheim, has been impressive, to say the least. Kudos also are due to Republic of Kenya, the host country. Mr. President, the United Nations Environment Assembly is the highest decision-making body on the environment, and G77 and China would like it to rise to the responsibilities that the Assembly's position entails. We are aware of the challenges, but affirm that difficulties should not be a recipe for inaction. The group believes that UNEA resolutions and decisions would remain confined to the conceptual realm, barring effective implementation and follow-up. Our movement towards the goal of a pollution-free planet requires the international community to strive as one and not be hamstrung by individual agendas and the desire to circumvent commitments made at the highest level of political leadership. Mr. President, UNGA Resolution 70/1 of September 2015, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted a comprehensive, far-reaching, and people-centered set of universal and transformative sustainable development goals and targets. It makes commitment to work tirelessly for the full implementation of the agenda by 2030, recognizes that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. The resolution makes commitment to achieving sustainable development in its three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental, in a balanced and integrated manner, and to building upon the achievements of the Millennium Development Goals and seeking to address their unfinished business. Our group reaffirms the resolution. Our group also reaffirms UNGA Resolution 69/313 on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of the Third International Conference on Financing for Development. It is an integral part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, supports and complements it, helps to contextualize its means of implementation targets with concrete policies and actions, and reaffirms a strong political commitment to address the challenge of financing and creating an enabling environment at all levels for sustainable development in the spirit of global partnership and solidarity. We welcome the Paris Agreement adopted under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We welcome its early entry into force. We encourage all its parties to fully implement the agreement according to their nationally determined contributions and common but differentiated responsibilities in a manner that does not threaten food production. G77 and China stresses the importance of inclusiveness within the United Nations development system and that no country and no one is left behind in the implementation of UNEA 3 resolutions. In this regard, the group calls upon the relevant organizations of the United Nations system within their respective mandates and resources to ensure the implementation of this matter. We feel that it is important to safeguard the natural environment in times of armed conflict and terrorist acts for the sake of future generations, and consolidate efforts for the protection of our common environment. Mr. President, there is a need for cooperation at the global and regional levels with a view to managing and mitigating the effects of sand and dust storms through enhancing early warning systems and the sharing of climate and weather information to forecast sand and dust storms, and affirming that resilient action to combat sand and dust storms requires a better understanding of the severe multidimensional impacts of sand and dust storms, including the deterioration of the health, well-being, and livelihood of people, desertification and land degradation, forest and biodiversity loss, land productivity, and their impact on sustainable economic growth. Mr. President, the G77 and China welcomes the opportunity afforded by UNEA 3 for interface between governments, scientific community, organized communities, and the private sector. Such cooperation is indeed required for a task which no sector can accomplish individually. The group urges all delegates to benefit from exchanges during and on the sidelines of UNEA 3 for mutual benefit. The Secretariat deserves commendation for facilitating different events, including leadership dialogues. But let us not forget that follow-up and sharing of knowledge distilled from different events would redound to the benefit of pollution control rather than self-congratulatory exultation. The group wishes to reiterate the importance of call in paragraph 88 of the document The Future We Want for, inter alia, consolidating UNEP headquarters functions at Nairobi. Mr. President, the group reiterates its continual call for buttressing the resources of United Nations Environment Programme, commensurate with our high expectations of the entity. In this regard, augmenting the Environment Fund is important, as are other voluntary contributions. Mr. President, G77 and China hopes that all draft resolutions will be adopted by consensus along with the draft ministerial declaration. It would highlight our seriousness not only in moving towards a pollution-free planet, but in strengthening the environmental dimension of Agenda 2030 and achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Next is the European Union and its member states. You have the floor. I invite His Excellency Siim Kiisler, Minister of Environment of Estonia. Please, Minister.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Also, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Serbia, and Ukraine align themselves with this statement. This third meeting of the United Nations Environment Assembly is a unique exercise due to the change of cycle and the back-to-back meeting of the open-ended Committee of the Permanent Representatives. We want to congratulate the UNEP President and the Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme for their contributions into delivering of this third session of the Assembly. Looking at the results of the OECPR, we are certain it will be a success. We welcome the very constructive and fruitful consultations at OECPR 3 led by UNEP President and the ministerial outcome document that has been endorsed by the OECPR and has been built on in-depth consultations, spirit of compromise and consensus. We will be proud to adopt and communicate to our people a global and a common and proactive consensual message to the world about the need to achieve a pollution-free planet. The European Union and its member states want to conclude this week with a meaningful and long-term vision to address pollution in all its complexity. This outcome document provides valuable guidance for all member states and stakeholders for this. We would also like to emphasize the interlinkages of pollution with biodiversity, climate change, and health. Most importantly, it is the health and well-being of both the people and the planet and its ecosystems that we must protect. In the resolution on environment and health, presented by the European Union and its member states, and co-sponsored by a number of other countries, we address the need to base our common action on the precautionary principle and take a cross-cutting approach. Among other actions, we call on the Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme to continue with his ongoing efforts in collaboration with the World Health Organization, relevant UN entities and stakeholders, including the private sector, to support countries upon request in developing integrated environment and health policies and measures, and to develop methods, tools and guidelines to promote integrated environmental and health risk assessments. Advancing the environmental agenda means addressing the health agenda. We wish to facilitate environment ministers' discussion of this important environment and health nexus. We invite all ministers and heads of delegations to a breakfast on Wednesday, the 6th of December at 8 in the morning to discuss the main cooperative actions and solutions towards preventing pollution and reducing its adverse impacts on health and the environment. We also wish to underline the need to adopt cross-sectoral approaches for solution-oriented action. Sustainable consumption and production, life cycle approaches, circular economy, and gender mainstreaming are an opportunity to address environmental issues in coherence with sustainability, climate change, and economic development. The European Union and its member states invite you all to a side event on Tuesday, the 5th of December at 1:15 p.m. in room 1 on the topic of the role of circular economy in the transition towards a pollution-free planet. This side event aims at setting the frame for global action on sustainable consumption and production, exploring how a circular economy can address resource constraints and generate economic opportunities for a pollution-free world. Dear colleagues, during the third session of OECPR, we have already reached a common understanding on 8 resolutions and decisions. Work has been intense and constructive during the weekend to achieve this consensual understanding on those resolutions that were discussed during OECPR 3. And we appreciate the efforts that all member states and the Secretariat have put into this process. Furthermore, we welcome all resolutions that have been endorsed by the OECPR. It is clear that behind each of these resolutions is a need for action that the countries, the private sector and other stakeholders, United Nations Environment Programme and other relevant institutions need to address now. This third session of the Assembly will be a success because of its clear purpose and a common goal of addressing pollution. I am sure that when we move further on the global environmental agenda in the coming years and prepare for the fourth session, we will put our full efforts to envisaging the environmental agenda and the vision for the united global action. What we discuss and agree upon during the UN Environment Assembly must benefit to the health and well-being of the people, our living environment, and biodiversity. Last but not least, we would like to highlight that we, as environment ministers, have the opportunity and responsibility to communicate the main political message from this global meeting to the high-level political forum and to the wider global public of the importance of pollution to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. The European Union and its member states have the following message: a commitment to a global joint action to address pollution that will make a real difference. But really acting on it will make the change even faster. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I wish you a successful week of solution-oriented contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I will now open the floor to representatives of African states. I invite His Excellency Minister of Environment of Gabon.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, heads of delegations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group in my capacity as chair of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, AMSEN. First, allow me to pay tribute to Your Excellency,
Mr. Edgar Gutierrez, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, and President of this third session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Allow me also to thank all the members of the Bureau for your outstanding work during the past year. Mr. President, the Africa Group fully endorses the theme of this UNEA 3, towards a pollution-free planet. It is very clear that pollution will undermine the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its related Sustainable Development Goals, as well as Africa's Agenda 2063. The enormous challenges that face our environment and consequently threaten human health and the well-being of ecosystems cannot be overemphasized. As we find solutions to control pollution, we wish to emphasize that poverty eradication is the greatest global challenge of all time and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Therefore, any solution to curb pollution that does not support poverty eradication cannot power the much-needed transformation required by the people of Africa for the sustainable development of our continent. Mr. President, regional ministerial fora, such as the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, ABSEN, and others, continue to play a very important role in the work of UNEA in promoting linkages between the global environmental agenda and activities at the regional and national levels, as well as enhancing inter-regional cooperation. We need to continue strengthening the regional environment ministerial fora in view of the evolving and complex nature of environment challenges. Mr. President, it is against this background that the African Ministers of Environment met in Libreville, Gabon in June 2017 under the theme, Investing in Innovative Environmental Solutions to Accelerate Implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063 in Africa. At this meeting, African ministers called for solutions to pollution that are development-oriented and that led to poverty eradication in Africa. In this regard, the Africa Group has tabled a number of resolutions at this Assembly with the overarching goal of highlighting concerns and proposing meaningful ways to effectively curb pollution and its negative impact on the socio-economic progress of our economies and countries. We further wish to underscore that implementation of all resolutions to be adopted require effective means of implementation, which include capacity building at all levels, financial supports, development and transfer of technology and technical support. Mr. President, we remain concerned by unbalanced implementation of the decisions of the former UNEP Governing Council and the resolutions of United Nations Environment Assembly. We have observed that this selective implementation is particularly skewed against many of the decisions and resolutions which affect our region. We therefore urge the Executive Director to, as far as possible, facilitate funding for implementation of the decisions and resolutions in a balanced manner, and to further ensure balanced reporting by UNEP in the implementation of all decisions and resolutions. The Africa Group will continue to engage the Executive Director of UNEP on strengthening UNEP's regional presence in Africa and on the consolidation of headquarters functions, in accordance with paragraph 88 of the future we want. We believe such strengthening will duly promote an efficient and effective delivery of UNEP mandates. Mr. President, the Africa Group wishes to express our commitment to support the Executive Director in effectively executing his vision for UNEP. The Group welcomes the Executive Director's commitment to undertake an open, transparent, and inclusive consultative process with regard to use of the proposed name UN Environment instead of UNEP. Mr. President, the Africa Group reaffirms its position on the importance of this Assembly, concluding with an outcome document based on the current theme in form of a concise political declaration negotiated by Member States and adopted by consensus. We believe that such an outcome document would demonstrate the commitment of our nations and people in addressing issues of pollution as one of the most pressing challenges of our time. Lastly, and on behalf of the Africa Group, I wish to once again express our unequivocal commitment to successful outcomes at this third session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. I now invite Asia-Pacific states. I invite a permanent representative of Oman to address the Assembly.
معالي السيد الرئيس.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, may peace and God's blessings be upon you. It is my pleasure to speak on behalf of the Asian and Pacific Group and would like to begin by repeating the commitment of this region to the application of the Sustainable Development Agenda and the Regional Agenda, including 2020, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and the Addis Ababa Agenda, as well as the Sendai Declaration. The ministerial fora which have taken place in Asia, which have discussed challenges and the possibilities for a pollution-free planet, were part of the preparation for this UNEA session. Our region covers Asia and there are very developed countries, and there is also a very diverse marine area with different levels of development. Development has a price. Non-sustainable production has an impact on the planet and on land. Land is also affected by sandstorms and dust storms. There is ocean pollution. There is land degradation, desertification, as well as other kinds of impact and factors which affect human health. Mr. President, amongst the priorities for a pollution-free planet, which have been discussed at the ministerial forum in our region, we discussed the following: a Charter for Sustainable Development agreed in 2017 to coordinate efforts towards sustainable development goals, as well as the Samoa Pathway. And contacts were undertaken to strengthen regional data and regional indices. Reports on the application of the various projects were carried out. Climate change is a threat to sustainable development. Our region has adopted a flexible program to cope with climate change. The Blue Pacific leaders have adopted a long-term vision in order to reach a blue planet and to preserve oceans. And this is something which will be discussed in New York next year amongst the Sustainable Development Goals. The international community calls for the protection of mountains, including the Himalaya, and the provision of technical support for mountain regions. We also need have programs to combat pollution and have exchanges on practices with the adoption of best practices for the region. Nature is highly diversified in our region, and it needs to be supported by the means of the adoption of sound environmental policies. We also need to highlight the strengthening of specific national plans and programs in order to combat land pollution, sand and dust storms, and to identify good examples to follow. We also need to look more closely at environment and health when we are dealing with environmental challenges and sustainable development. We need to call for the preparation of national plans and strategies in order to deal with sand and dust storms. There is also the importance of preserving the environment in times of conflict and against terrorist acts for future generations, to make greater efforts to protect our common environment. We also have to be aware and to understand of the costs of pollution, as well as the importance of production and consumption sustainably. The participation of citizens and stakeholders, as well as governments, which could lead to exemplary plans in line with these concepts. To have reuse of certain products and to strengthen SDG 12 are also important. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we reiterate our commitment to the conclusions of the third UNEA to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to move towards a pollution-free environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I invite Latin American Caribbean states. I invite Her Excellency Ambassador Taylor.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this speech on behalf of the Latin American and Caribbean Group. Mr. Chair, first of all, we express our gratitude to the Republic of Kenya as host country of this important assembly, which we hope will allow us to reach common agreements and find joint solutions to deal with the challenges of pollution on ecosystems, the economy, and health. Likewise, we express our profound gratitude to Mr. Edgar Gutierrez Espeleta, Minister of Environment and Energy of Costa Rica, and his team for his leadership and tireless work at the head of the Bureau of the Assembly, as well as Dr. Dennis Liu, Minister of Environment and Sanitation of Barbados. We highlight and appreciate greatly the efforts of the Presidency towards reaching consensus in the outcome document proposed for consideration of the Assembly. The GRULAC strongly supports the draft as a ministerial declaration which reflects the global interest to achieve a pollution-free planet. We call for its adoption as agreed in the open-ended CPR. The region of Latin America and the Caribbean has approximately 634 million inhabitants as data from 2015. It is the most urbanized region on the planet, with 80% of its population living in urban areas, where 130 million people live in persistent poverty. Our sustainable development, its economic, social, and environmental dimensions depends largely on our natural resources. Therefore, they play a key role in poverty eradication and the reduction of inequalities. Our region faces great challenges with respect to air, water, coastal, and ocean pollution, among others. An estimated 100 million people are threatened by air pollution. 16 cities in the region still show poor air quality, exceeding international standards for particulate matter. With respect to water system, coasts, and oceans, the Caribbean Sea was recently recognized as the second most polluted by plastics in the world. In this sense, we recognize the negative effects of pollution and the challenges to combat and prevent it. And we reaffirm our commitment to adopt joint actions to effectively tackle this problem. We, the representatives of the Latin American and Caribbean countries, emphasize the importance of recognizing the United Nations Environment Assembly as the highest governing body of the United Nations Environment Program, as well as the leading universal environmental authority that sets the global environmental agenda. Reiterate the need to ensure the effective participation of all the countries of our region in this important decision-making body. Only inclusive participation will allow informed and transparent decision-making that integrates the different visions and strengthens the universal character of this assembly. Express our concern about the obstacles that the United Nations Environment Assembly has faced in transmitting through its president the main result of its decisions to the high-level political forum. Highlight the significant impacts of the extreme climate events that have occurred in our region, leaving more than $200 billion in damages without counting regretful human fatalities. This undoubtedly demonstrates the vulnerability of our countries to the effects of climate change and natural disasters. In this regard, we reaffirm the importance of adopting joint actions to prepare all regions to face these challenges. Mr. Chair, we wish to state that the proposals presented by our region address priority issues that contribute to reiterate and strengthen the global commitment to achieve the goal that we have proposed to this Assembly towards a pollution-free planet and the positioning of UNEA. Likewise, we thank the countries that have submitted their contributions, their willingness to merge resolution proposals with similar content in order to facilitate the debates. So we are confident that after the intense negotiations of the last days, there will be adopted at the end of this session. We declare that the implementation of the Paris Agreement of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change will be fundamental to guarantee compliance with the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals, including in relation to the protection of the planet's biodiversity and ecosystems. The aforementioned challenges and implementation of international commitment require a continuous joint effort to facilitate and ensure the necessary financial resources, technology transfer, and capacity building. Finally, Mr. Chair, we are pleased to announce that Argentina has taken over the presidency of the 21st meeting of the Forum of Ministers of the Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition, in 2018, our region will host the World Water Forum in Brazil and the 6th plenary session of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem, IPBES, in Colombia. We want to embrace this opportunity to invite all of you to participate in these important meetings and to contribute to the success of the debates. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Taylor, for your statement. I now wish to move on the agenda item 4, report of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. I invite His Excellency Mr. John Moretti, Chair of the Committee and High Commissioner and Permanent Representative of Botswana to the UN Environment Programme, to present the report of the committee, focusing on the key outcomes of the third meeting of the open-ended committee, which concluded last Friday. Mr. Moretti.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Distinguished ministers, delegates, excellencies, friends, I understand and know very well I stand between you and the cow meeting, and therefore I'm going to cut out what was intended to be a little longer presentation into probably 4 minutes. And therefore, I have the honor to report to the Assembly on the work of the meeting of the third open-ended committee of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, which took place in Nairobi on 29th November to 1st December. The main issues that the committee considered were preparation of draft resolutions for transmission to UNEA 3, administrative and budgetary matters, update on the 6th Global Environment Outlook, consultations on the ministerial declaration, as well as the budget and program performance, including implementation of the Assembly's previous resolutions. Now, before I scare you, if I mention there were 16 resolutions, you might think there are 16. I just want to confirm that of what was initially 16 draft resolutions and 4 draft decisions, these were reduced following very good cooperation between member states to merge texts that were addressing similar issues. So we ended up with 9 draft resolutions and 3 draft decisions. So that is good progress indeed. I would like to thank the facilitators who worked hard throughout the third meeting of the Open-Ended Committee of Permanent Representatives. Particularly, we had Ambassador Tara of Pakistan, we had Ambassador Taja Fernandez of Finland, we had Ambassador Elizabeth Taylor of Colombia, and we had Ambassador Marek Gastecki of Poland. Their hard work led to the work that we are presenting to you today. I cannot forget our predecessor, my predecessor, chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, Ambassador Julia Pataki, because the foundation she laid enabled us to continue the work that we are presenting for you today. I am pleased to inform you that the third open-ended meeting of the committee agreed to recommend the following 7 draft resolutions and 2 draft decisions for adoption by the third session of the Assembly. There is the draft resolution on contributions of the United Nations Environment Assembly to the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. There's the resolution on investing in innovative environmental solutions for accelerating implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. There's the resolution on managing soil pollution to achieve sustainable development. There is the resolution on preventing and reducing air pollution to improve air quality globally. The resolution on eliminating exposure to lead paint and promoting environmentally sound management of used lead-acid batteries. There's a resolution on pollution mitigation by mainstreaming biodiversity into key sectors. There's a resolution on addressing water pollution to protect and restore water-related ecosystems. These are the resolutions that are recommended for adoption, that the Committee of Permanent Reps, the third OECPR, is recommending for adoption. Furthermore, the committee meeting agreed to transmit the following draft resolutions and decisions to the Assembly for finalization because they were not as final as the other 7 that I outlined. Yes, I almost forgot to mention that the draft decisions on extension of the delivery date for the 6th Global Environment Outlook, as well as the one on mainstreaming of trust funds and earmark contributions, are also being recommended for adoption. The ones that are not yet ready and are being recommended for finalization are the resolution dealing with marine litter and microplastics, the resolution on environment and health, and the resolution on pollution prevention and control in areas affected by terrorist operations and armed conflicts. And I'm pleased to know that at the COW, you will hear the report on the arrangement to try and finalize these resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, at its meeting of 1st December 2017, the Joint Bureau of the UNEA and the Committee of Permanent Representatives recommended a program of work for the informal consultations which took place over the weekend, and these focused on the resolutions that I've just outlined, which I mentioned were not yet finalized, except the one on mainstreaming biodiversity into key sectors, which was successfully concluded and has been in the list of those recommended for adoption. Let me just thank the facilitators, particularly those who volunteered to work through the weekend, amongst others, the Ambassador of Brazil, Ambassador, His Excellency Fernando Coimbra, Andrew McNay of Australia, and the delegate of Costa Rica, who worked hard on the resolutions over the weekend, to the extent that we have fewer resolutions that are now going before, that are now going to be worked on further. I'm pleased to inform you that the committee managed to endorse for consideration by the Assembly the draft ministerial outcome document following the consultations that were conducted by the President on both the 29th and 30th. The committee also considered Agenda Item 8 on budget and program performance, including implementation of the Assembly's resolutions at its first session on the morning of 29th November. The Deputy Executive Director provided an overview of program performance from January 2016 to June 2017, including a brief analysis of the implementation of the 25 resolutions adopted by the Assembly at its second session under the theme Delivering on the Environmental Dimension of the 2030 Agenda. He also provided a progress report of the 19 progress reports on the implementation of resolutions submitted by the Executive Director for consideration by the Assembly at its third session, including on some of the specific recommendations contained in that report. The co-chairs of the special program to support institutional strengthening at the national level to enhance implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the Minamata Convention on Mercury, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management, established pursuant to Environment Assembly Resolution 1.5 on chemicals and waste. They presented their report, the report of the Executive Board of the Special Program, and the committee took note of that report. The details of the discussion by member states on those items are reflected in the draft report of the third open-ended committee of the permanent reps, which is available now on the committee's portal. In the interest of time, again, I will not present these. I just want to conclude by thanking the committee for its hard work, for the commitment, for the cooperative spirit that was displayed by delegates throughout the meetings. I think through this package of draft resolutions and decisions, we have fulfilled our mandate as the intercessional body of the Assembly. I believe we will, through these efforts, help move the world towards a pollution-free planet. Special thanks must go to the facilitators, the Secretariat, and all those who worked hard to make this meeting a success. Least but not least, Mr. President, I thank you for your unflinching commitment for the hard work of the work of the UN Environment Assembly, which was demonstrated indeed by your investment of time, your energy, your passion throughout your tenure. Your personal support to me as his CPR chair and to the Bureau, as well as your commitment to inclusive and transparent consultations with all member states has been a source of inspiration to us all. I want to thank you and hope that in rushing through this report, you got some clarity and you can get ready for the next elements of our assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Moretti. I now would like to invite the Committee of the Whole to start its work now in Conference Room 1. Those delegates wishing to participate in the CAO, please go to Conference Room 1. Thank you. As I stated by the Chair, the following decisions and resolutions are recommended for adoption by the Committee of Permanent Representatives. The decisions are: extension of the delivery date for the 6th Global Environment Outlook, management of trust funds and earmarked contributions. Those are the decisions, and the resolutions recommended for adoption are contributions of the United Nations Environment Assembly to the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, investing in innovative environmental solutions for accelerating implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, managing soil pollution to achieve sustainable development, preventing and reducing air pollution to improve air quality globally, and eliminating exposure to lead paint and promoting environmentally sound management of used lead-acid batteries. I propose that the Assembly considers for adoption the following draft resolution which consensus was built during the last 3 days: pollution mitigation by mainstreaming biodiversity into key sectors, and addressing water pollution to protect and restore water-related ecosystems. I propose these are submitted for adoption at the closing plenary session to take place on Wednesday, 6 December, so as to allow the Secretariat to conclude the translation into official UN languages of all draft recommended resolutions. I see no objections. Is so decided. I propose that the Assembly allocates to the Committee of the Whole the task of endorsing and therefore finalizing the following draft resolutions for which consensus was built during the informal consultations held during the last 2 days. Decision on the provisional agenda, date and venue of the 4th.
I was asking for the floor quite some time ago. Could you give me the floor? No, I was asking for the floor immediately when John was finished.
Okay, friends. I propose the Assembly allocates to the Committee of the Whole the task of endorsing and therefore finalizing the following draft resolutions for which consensus was built during the formal consultation held during the last 2 days. Decision on the provisional agenda, date and venue of the 4th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, marine litter and microplastics, environment and health, pollution, prevention and control in areas affected by terrorist operations and armed conflicts. Any objections? I see none. So decided. Before closing this agenda item, and as informed by the Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, 2 additional resolutions have been submitted for the consideration of the Assembly which have not been previously considered by the Committee of Permanent Representatives. These proposals are entitled Strengthening South-South Cooperation Initiatives for Sustainable Development and Consolidation of United Nations Environment Programme Headquarter Functions. I wish to recommend to the Assembly that these 2 proposals are allocated to the Committee of the Whole, who will consider them in the context of Agenda Item 7. Any objections? I see none. It is so decided. Switzerland has requested to speak. Please, Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I was asking for the floor quite some time ago, but it seems that the Secretariat was not realizing that we wanted to make a statement immediately after Ambassador John Moretti, because I think we Switzerland think it's first of all very important to acknowledge and to thank him for the excellent work that the open-ended working group was conducting and really helping UNEA to the preparation for UNEA and clearing many of the decisions. And Switzerland, in that context, wanted, before the Committee of the Whole is sent out to continue the work on the remaining issues, indicate that Switzerland is proposing an amendment to the decision on the date and venue of the next UNEA. We think the arrangement of which we were benefiting this time, that the open-ending CPR took place immediately prior to UNEA, is a very good arrangement. We will have only 15 months left until the next UNEA is meeting, and therefore Switzerland is going to propose a paragraph that requests that the next open-ended CPR will meet back-to-back with the UNEA, having the same arrangement like this time, so that again we can benefit from the excellent work of the open-ended CPR. And we hope that you also will mandate the Committee of the Whole to look at that proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. Indeed, it's a very good recommendation, and this point has been allocated to the CAO. Thank you. USA?
Thank you, Mr. President. And we thank Switzerland for its proposal regarding consideration of the modalities for UNEA 4. We have also been quite impressed with the progress that has been made using this format at UNEA 3 with the back-to-back meetings. And we would support consideration of following the same model at UNEA 4, given how quickly it is coming up on the calendar year. We would also like to support consideration of the duration of days that are allocated to both OE, CPR, and UNEA. Thank you.
Thank you, USA. The date and venue of the next assembly is being considered at the CAO, not in our plenary here now. So that would be good if you come to the CAO and deliver when this resolution comes up. Thank you. Excellencies, no more? No more. Okay. I wish to call upon all member states to respect the need to ensure early submission of text which has been set out jointly by the bureaus of the Assembly and of the Committee. Early submissions of text is a widely supported practice by member states as contributing to strengthening the governance processes of the Assembly and its subsidiary bodies. To this end, I encourage future assemblies to make early submissions of text a rule in our method of work. Before concluding this agenda item, I wish to invite interested delegates to join the Committee of the Whole, who will start its deliberations right now in Conference Room 1. And I wish to inform you that upon the finalization of its work, the Committee of the Whole will report back to the Assembly as its closing plenary on Wednesday, 6th of December. This concludes the consideration of Agenda Item 4. I wish to invite the Environment Assembly to turn its attention to Agenda Item 9 of our agenda entitled High-Level Segment. Under this agenda item, the meeting will consider national statements from member states of the Environment Assembly, states not members of the Environment Assembly, representatives of specialized agencies, United Nations bodies, intergovernmental bodies, and observers of international non-governmental organizations. It is the expectation of the Environment Assembly that through these statements, we compile the priorities of countries and institutions to accelerate actions to address pollution. To articulate the consideration of the statements, the Secretariat has compiled a list of speakers in accordance with Rule 35 and 36 of our Rules of Procedures. In order to ensure that all representatives wishing to take the floor are allowed to do so, I propose that the Assembly limit the time on speeches to a maximum of 3 minutes for member states and 5 minutes for those who are speaking on behalf of groups of regional ministerial fora in accordance to Rule 38 of our Rules of Procedures. Despite the allocated time being only 3 minutes, your full statement will be uploaded on the UN Environment Assembly website. Are there any comments on this recommendation? I see none. It is so decided. Furthermore, I would like to propose that the Assembly makes exceptions on the time limit for heads of states. Are there any comments on this recommendation? I see none. It's so decided. Our order for the remainder of the session is set out in the speakers list. Before I invite our first speaker, I want to inform our delegates that a timer is set in front of the speakers in order to monitor the allocated time while speaking. Secondly, the microphone will automatically turn off after the allotted speaking time and a small grace period. I urge all delegates to exhibit restraint and make your statement within the allotted time. Please be informed that a video and a written text of statements made will be published on the website of the Environment Assembly. On this note, I would like to remind delegations that have not sent their statements to the Secretariat yet to do so. It is now my distinct honor to call upon Her Excellency Francisca Ashieti Adunton from Ghana. Oh, it's here. Thank you.
Mr. President, honorable ministers and heads of delegations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ghana delegation, I wish to express our sincere appreciation to UNEP, the President of UNEA, and the government and people of Kenya for once again hosting this very important meeting. Ghana has been actively engaged at the national, regional, and international levels in many pollution prevention and control initiatives aimed at promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Pollution prevention and control has been at the heart of Ghana's developmental efforts, and these have been mainstreamed into the national environmental policy and Ghana's legal framework. Our 2018 budget places special emphasis on the SDGs, and it is our resolve to use the budget as a major instrument to push forward our national environmental agenda. we would like to remind this meeting that His Excellency, the President of Ghana, is the co-chair of the UN Advocacy Group for the SDGs, and therefore we share a special responsibility to perform creditably on the SDGs. Ghana has also ratified all the agreements and frameworks on sound management of chemicals and waste, and we continue to play an active role in their implementation through the adoption of innovative approaches. One such approach is the application of the concept of sustainable chemistry. To this end, Ghana is partnering with countries, including Germany, in advancing the concept of sustainable chemistry for the attainment of the SDGs and the sound management of chemicals and hazardous waste in the long term. In 2016, Ghana passed the Hazardous and Electronic Waste Control and Management Act to enforce extended producer responsibility and the management of the end of life of electronic items imported into the country. Ghana ratified the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016 in our commitment to implement mitigation and adaptation programs towards global emission cuts. We are also committed to a conditional emission reduction trajectory of 45% by 2030 and to building a sustainable, resilient, and low-carbon society. In partnership with local and international stakeholders, we are vigorously pursuing pre-2020 preparatory activities and programs to lay a sound foundation for delivering on this commitment. We believe that UNEA is indeed the global platform for discussing environmental pollution and providing direction for concerted action on pollution prevention. Our expectations at this assembly are that there would be resolutions and outcomes aimed at placing pollution prevention at the heart of our developmental efforts. In conclusion, we wish to register our strong support and political commitment to a comprehensive global compact towards a pollution-free planet that builds on the opportunities and successes of existing agreements for effective governance. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement, Excellency. Now I invite the next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Erasmo Martinez from Mexico. Sir, you have the floor.
Sí, bueno. Señor.
Mr. Edgar Gutierrez, President of UNEA, distinguished ministers, deputy ministers of member states, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, Mexico welcomes you to the head of the Bureau of UNEP, representing the Latin America and Caribbean region. We also welcome other members of the Bureau. The Mexican delegation subscribes to the intervention given by Colombia on behalf of GULAC. This third UNEA is in a context of positive progress made in the multilateral context, and the recent COP23 on climate change, the entry into force of the first conference of the parties of the Minamata Convention, the adoption of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, and the 13th conference of the parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity, amongst others. Mr. President, this assembly provides us with an opportunity to reflect and provide effective actions for mutual cooperation and collaboration amongst member states, as well as efficient coordination. And this is of transcendental importance in order to provide our efforts with the power that they need and to ensure that we achieve the objectives that we have set ourselves for a pollution-free planet. The central slogan of this assembly bolsters the vision of Mexico on the importance of providing collective responses to global challenges such as mitigation of pollution. We also believe that we should deal with air pollution, soil pollution, ocean pollution, and other water bodies in a holistic manner. Each country and each region has had experience and found solutions that deserve to be shared. And this will allow us to find the way to achieving common objectives. The environmental agenda is not an inflexible, unchanging agenda. It should be understood as a dynamic process with implications over the next decades. UNEP plays a fundamental role in dealing with various challenges, some of which already recognized and some which are emerging, such as the principal authority that determines global policies for the international environmental agenda. UNEP is also central in the implementation of Agenda 2030, working in coordination with the rest of the United Nations system to ensure the effective inclusion of the environmental pillar in the context of sustainable development. Mr. President, the agreements and decisions that have come out of the work during this week must show consistency and relevance in terms of the global objective of this Assembly and allow us to set ourselves an appropriate roadmap for future sessions of UNEP. In this regard, we call upon UNEP to maintain its permanent and dynamic dialogue with Member States for the development of strategies and frameworks for action in order to achieve the resolutions that have been adopted and the implementation itself of Agenda 2030. Mr. President, the third OE Committee of Permanent Representatives resulted in certain progress in negotiations on many resolutions thanks to the leadership of Ambassador John Moretti, the chair of the CPR Bureau. However, there are still items outstanding that require solution. However, we are sure that
Next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Chadkiat Athakol from Thailand. You have a floor, sir.
Mr. President, on behalf of the real Thai government, I commend all of us here for taking this precious opportunity to discuss the pollution as the main theme of UNEP 3, which will contribute to the global effort towards a pollution-free planet and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thailand's implementation of SDGs is guided by the Sufficient Economy Philosophy, or SEP, focusing on balanced development of all dimensions and community resilience. We have provided technical cooperation based on SEP for many countries through SEP for SDG partnership. To address pollution, Thailand has been implementing the 20-year pollution management strategy and the 5-year National Environmental Health Strategic Plan, which aims to reduce morbidity caused by environmental impact, while also attaching importance to the development of green innovations and technologies. Mr. President, recognizing the marine litter's transboundary nature and its adverse impact on our ecosystem and economy, Thailand is drafting a plastic litter management plan to facilitate the development of financial tools for waste management and to promote eco-friendly packaging design and production of alternatives to plastic materials. The pilot projects to phase out plastic bottle capsule has been already implemented in Thailand, targeting to reduce plastic waste by 520 tons per year. A recent survey of litter on beaches in Thailand indicated that there were 760,000 cigarette butts per square kilometer found on the beach. As a result, the smoking-free zone has been introduced at 24 popular tourist beaches in Thailand since last month. And after the trial period, the smoking-free zone will be enforced at all beaches in Thailand. At the UN Ocean Conference this year, Thailand announced our voluntary commitment to SDG 14, which include combating marine litter through regional frameworks of ASEAN. Last month, Thailand hosted the ASEAN Conference on Marine Debris as a venue for enhancing cooperation on addressing marine litter. Mr. President, last but not least, Thailand promotes partnerships among the public, private, and people in implementing the SDG, many of which fight pollution in campaigns such as Zero Waste Thailand. Our stakeholders are encouraged to take part in developing pollution-free planet that we can enjoy at present and also for the next generations to come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement, Excellency. Once again, I remind all speakers that microphones will switch off when ended third minute. Please, that is automatically, that not we decided on that, as we agreed. I invite now next speaker. This is His Excellency Ahmad Al-Far from Jordan. You have the floor, sir.
معالي رئيس جمعية الأمم المتحدة للبيئة
Distinguished President, distinguished environment ministers, Executive Director of UNEP, Mr. Eric Solheim, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings. At the beginning, I would like to address my thanks and appreciation to the Republic of Kenya for the warm welcome we have received. We also thank the Secretariat of the UN, UNEP, and those who have organized this session for their efforts to ensure the success of this great event. As you are aware, bringing about sustainable development means we have to consider economic, social, and environment aspects in an integrated way. We have to do this homogeneously in order to bring about prosperity while protecting the environment and sustainability and protecting resources for coming generations. However, we face challenges and pressures in our countries, including the increase in pollution, the lack of environmental awareness of our populations, the phenomenon of climate change, its negative impact on land and on human health, and environmental degradation in many areas, including those which suffer armed conflicts or are victims of terrorist attacks. Syria, for example, this has meant that 1.3 million Syrians have taken refuge in Jordan. And in accordance with the response plan from Jordan to the Syrian crisis, we need $2.7 billion per year in order to cope and to deal with the negative impact of the crisis at all levels, including in the environmental sector. International aid given to Jordan is only about 35% of what we need. This has led the government to dedicate a quarter of its annual budget in order to deal with the crisis. We have to emphasize the need and importance of the international community carrying out its responsibilities to Jordan and supporting it in an appropriate manner so that we can acquit ourselves of this burden on behalf of the international community and sharing of responsibilities. I should also like to stress the importance of the 2016 resolution at the last session on the preservation of the environment in zones of armed conflict and those which neighbour them. We are facing great challenges, and we consider ourselves to be a pioneer country at the regional and international level for sustainable development. Jordan has adopted methods which have made it possible to do this by means, for example, of the adoption of methods to promote the green economy and also a methodology for production modes. For consumption and production by 2025, with a stress on renewable energy.
Thank you for your statement, Excellency. Our next speaker is His Excellency Marek Rok-Garcecki from Poland. Ambassador, you have the floor.
I have the honor to read National Statement of the Republic of Poland on behalf of the Minister of Environment, Professor Jan Szyszko. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the world currently faces numerous challenges. Among them, there is a burning need to improve the state of environment, to achieve pollution-free planet, to eradicate poverty, to implement the Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals, as well as the Paris Agreement. In this regard, Poland welcomes the work undertaken by UNEP. UNEP has a key role in linking all environmental issues to sustainable development as a result of its unique mandate as the global authority on the environment and its responsibility to foster the science policy interface. Ladies and gentlemen, let me focus on two issues: climate change and air quality. Climate change is one of the most serious global challenges. Responding to this requires joint effort of all countries who have real influence on the level of global greenhouse gas emissions. Poland considers the Paris Agreement as one of the most important treaties of our times. It will allow us to stop the growth of CO2 concentration in the most efficient way. Poland wants to be a leader in this process, and we want the whole European Union to be a leader in implementation of the Paris Agreement. We decided to host the next climate change conference, COP24, in Katowice. In 2018, Paris Agreement must become a living instrument which realizes its goals through implementation package. The host city, Katowice, is one of the symbols of Poland's development and economic success. Both the city and the whole region have been transformed from a high-emission zone to a low-emission zone of science, innovation, culture, and modern industry. This mining region has undergone such a substantial change without any larger social unrest. Air quality remains a big challenge. In Poland, the main problem is the local air pollution. It identified mainly in the household sector, and it's particularly acute in winter during the heating season. We have already undertaken several legislative measures to improve the situation, including legal acts on solid fuel boilers and standards for solid fuel quality. We are introducing requirement to gradually connect buildings located in urban and suburban areas to heat distribution network. For most vulnerable members of our society, we are developing a comprehensive public policy framework that ensures access to clean energy. We also focus on geothermal energy, which is considered to be the cleanest of all renewable energy sources. Ladies and gentlemen, taking this opportunity, I would like to congratulate the President of UNEA, Mr. Gutierrez, on its remarkable work on the ministerial declaration. Once again, Poland wants to stress its full support for this document. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your statement, Excellency. Our next speaker is Mr. Nuritdin Inamov from Russian Federation. You have the floor, sir.
Distinguished President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I'd like to welcome all participants to the third session of UNEA and begin by saying that 2017 in Russia, it was declared as the Year of the Environment. We play a very important role in achieving sustainable development. There is the great natural capital of our country, wetlands, forests, and much potential for biodiversity. we're trying to be at the forefront of forming a new economy in the world. President Putin is also trying to help promote sustainability. We're promoting environmental security up to 2025, and it's important to say that in Russia, this is recognized as being a component of our national security, and this topic has strategic priority. A basic aim of our policies is preserving the quality of the environment and well-being for humanity, as well as a sustainable development. We want to prevent air pollution, pollution in the cities, preservation of water ecosystems, biodiversity, including all forms of plants and animals. Recently in Russia, we have had a great reform of environmental legislation. The president has begun this a few years ago in the federal laws of our country, and is now updating them to take better care of the environment. We have a new law on introducing the best possible technology to promote this. All of this new law in the entities of the Russian Federation are to come into a new system before 2019 in the entities, and we're going to introduce the principle of the best available technologies in order to work in lines with our agenda today, that is the prevention of pollution on the planet. Another important principle is that of preserving our natural territory. In Baikal, we set up our first reserve, and we are aiming at covering 14% of the territory of our country. Our delegation supports the basic themes of UNEA 3 and is ready to cooperate in constructive dialogue aimed at improving and preserving the environment in the world and our territories. I wish everybody every possible success. Thank you.
Next speaker is His Excellency Madame Fatina Mukarubibi from Rwanda. You have the floor, Madam.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, on behalf of the government of Rwanda, I would like to express our appreciation to the UN Environment for convening this important assembly, and our gratitude to the President of the UN Environment Assembly for your leadership, and our gratitude to the UN Environment Executive Director and Under Secretary General of the United Nations for your leadership and organization of this assembly. I also thank the Republic of Kenya for the hospitality and warm welcome we received since our arrival in this beautiful city of Nairobi. The Republic of Rwanda is pleased to associate with the global agenda of development. While we still have a long way to go, the progress is promising, and we believe we have created an environment conducive for principles of low emission development and promotion of a circular economy. Almost a decade ago, we introduced the law banning polythene bags. While there was resistance initially, the experience taught us that circular-themed laws and policies don't only have a positive impact on the environment, but also create new opportunities. We congratulate Kenya for having taken this bold step of banning the use of plastic bags and encourage other nations to put in place such mechanisms against plastics to prevent further pollution of our water bodies, into which millions of tons of plastic end up every day, affecting wildlife and our food chain. In 2011, Rwanda developed and enacted its first ever green growth and climate resilience strategy. This groundbreaking policy document guides the country's sustainable development agenda in response to climate change. Since that time, the government of Rwanda has taken a number of steps to integrate green growth into policy making and planning, as well as institutional development. For example, the Rwanda Green Fund invested close to $1.5 million to develop the e-waste recycling facility. After 1 year of operation, 120 tons of e-waste have been collected and treated at the facility. 400 computers have been refurbished for use by our schools, and 279 tons of carbon dioxide emission have been mitigated. Such projects do not only beat pollution, but also are a source of job creation, which our people need. Rwanda is pleased to partner with UN Environment and the rest of the world to develop actions aimed at promoting a clean and climate-resilient world. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank parties for their commitment to ratify the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which has now entered into force, and urge nations that have not yet ratified to do so and join this noble cause of a pollution-free planet. In conclusion, I wish to express Rwanda's commitment to always support and partner with other nations for a sustainable development through a green economy approach. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for your statement, Excellency. Next speaker is Mr. Dr. Osama Fakeh from Saudi Arabia. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, Executive Director of UNEP, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all to thank the United Nations Environment Assembly for its theme towards a pollution-free planet, which expresses the wishes of all member states as they wish to preserve the environment and reduce pollution. I thank all member states who have delegated representatives to come here before us for the exchange of ideas, and we believe that this will be a fruitful exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last decades, we have noted the increase of risks related to climate change and to demographic growth, as well as human-based activities. And this requires efforts and activities in order to set up mechanisms for the protection of the environment and for human capacity building and for the exchange of experience and expertise, and taking into account the environment so that we are able to have the tools necessary to protect the environment. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has, since its foundation, taken into account all aspects relating to the environment. In our constitution, we work towards the protection of the environment, and we seek to work with all sectors across the country in order to enshrine the principles of sustainable development within Islam. Since its foundation, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has always worked for a balance between the environment and economic growth, while facing the challenges relating to the environment, which become ever more urgent. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is working on its Project 2030 and has put the environment at the heart of this, and its National Development Policy of 2020 has objectives relating to a balance between the economy and the environment. Many objectives including the preparation of a national strategy for a prosperous environment and a national programme for capacity building in the area of energy, air quality, reuse and management of waste, protection of the vegetation cover in the country, biodiversity across the kingdom, amongst others, other programs and projects that seek to protect the environment and to comply with sustainable development. We work with the international organizations on our environmental matters and carry out many activities and have adopted all of the tools and texts, the latest being the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. We do need to develop further strategies and policies.
Thank you, sir.
التلوث توفير الحال والسلام على كوكبنا وندعو جميع الأطراف للتكاتف والعمل السوي للوصول إلى هدف وشكرا لكم.
Thank you for your statement, sir. Now, considering that there is a time, I propose to the Assembly that we have additional 2 speakers, major group business and industry and major group regional representatives. Are there any comments on this recommendation? I see no objection. It is so decided. Now, please, representative major group business and industry, you have the floor.
You're not business and industry, go ahead. Just say you're not business and industry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We are not the business and industry, but we would like to present the outcome of the Global Major Group and Stakeholder Forum. We are very much appreciate the UN Environment together with Konrad Adenauer Foundation, Nordic Council of Ministers, African Network for Animal Welfare, Pan-African Climate Justice Network, and Asia-Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism. For us, pollution is not an accident. The 9 million deaths worldwide are consequences of an extractive economic system that prioritizes economic growth and profits. System change based on the distributive justice, economic justice, social and gender justice, ecological justice, and accountability to people is critical in addressing the root causes of pollution. A pollution-free planet will only be achieved if we address the systemic issues like wealth inequality, unjust trade and investment, land grabbing and extractive resource hunger, militarism, as well as patriarchy and authoritarian governance. Just and equitable transition is needed to ensure of green and decent jobs, environmental sustainability, and gender equality underpinned by human rights and Rio principles. Mr. Chair, political will, leadership, as well as bold global policy are crucial to define the rules of the games. UNEA should ensure coherence between different environmental conventions, as well as ensuring the environmental dimension of the SDGs. It is important for us that UNEA also focus on establishing legally binding regulation. We would like to see the start with the international legally binding agreement on plastic and plastic pollutions, pesticide conventions, or support for legally binding treaty on TNC and other business enterprises. We need to stop false solutions and techno-fixes. And lastly, we urge the member states to pay attention to develop an inclusive stakeholder participating policy. Now we'll give it to the business and industries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, distinguished delegates. Business welcomes the opportunity to participate in UNEA 3 and the chance to partner in the Science Policy Business Forum and to organize a business symposium yesterday. The Business and Industry Major Group has come together under the banner of the Global Business Alliance for the Environment to reflect our commitment to play our role and meet our responsibilities in helping to move towards a pollution-free planet. Achieving outcomes here in synergy with the SDGs depends on collaborative actions among all societal actors. All business sectors can and will bring experience, know-how, and innovative capacity to this venture. We need tailored, specific responses to each source of pollution, reflecting economic and social circumstances. Business emphasizes the importance of building national capacity and infrastructure to address pollution through sound regulation and management, stimulating innovation, and seeking pragmatic policy options and partnerships. Business in its diversity is a critical part of solutions and investment and is ready to work with UNEP, governments, and other stakeholders to act on UNEA outcomes. Let's identify practical solutions and policies and get to work. As UNEP senior scientist Dr. Jan Liu has said, we are going green and there's no turning back. Thank you.
Thank you. Last speaker is regional representative. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Regional representatives are elected by 6 regions to connect civil society groups with the UN environment and UNEA process. We represent Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, North America and West Asia regions. Through the outcomes of regional consultation meetings, we have identified several common and cross-cutting issues that undermine efforts towards ensuring a pollution-free planet and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In cooperation with the global major groups and stakeholders, we bring the voice of the grassroots communities that are affected by environmental destructions and pollutions across the earth to the UNEA process. We urge UN Environment and its regional offices to support civil society engagement in all regions, pointing to the example of Asia-Pacific Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism, which is a proven process for advancing strategic issues through bottom-up organizations by civil society, built on principles of transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness. We would like to highlight clear calls on specific actions, which have come out of our regional consultations. We urge you to implement a human rights-based approach to ending pollution, take swift action to the end of extrajudicial killings and forced displacements of communities. We call for a global agreement to combat air pollution. We ask for the state and corporate accountability, upholding the polluter pays principle and respecting environmental limits, providing strict regulation of extractive industries, whose activities often have devastating impacts on communities and livelihoods when regulatory protections do not exist or not are enforced. We want an equitable transition to sustainable and community-driven economies, creating decent and green jobs, protecting livelihoods, and providing universal social stability for all, reflecting gender equality. We are very concerned about the environmental impacts of the current liberalized model of trade and investment agreements. We support green and socially just trade, rules to limit e-waste being sent from the high-income countries to low-income countries, and other means of creating a just and equitable global society. We call on UNEA to direct UN Environment to support investigative missions on the environmental consequences of current conflicts, which are placing extreme stress on the natural resources and ecosystems and resulting in refugee crises in different regions. Lastly, the UNEA process should be upheld principles of inclusive participation, including ethical rules for partnerships between UN Environment and the private sector. Muchas gracias, Chair.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now we have come to the time allocated to this meeting. Our next meeting will take place at 15, when we will continue with the presentation of national statements. Allow me to invite the Secretariat to make any housekeeping announcements.
Thank you, distinguished Vice President Stepanovic, and thank you to all delegates who are with us here today. My announcements are very brief. The first one is just to invite all delegates that have not yet applied for the DSA. We are ready to allocate collection today at 3 p.m., conference room 7. So those of you that are funded by the Secretariat to come to this assembly can collect your DSA in conference room 7 after 3 p.m. The last request is for all speakers to send us your statements. We have regularly updated the speakers list, and it's important that we have your statements to be able to publish them in full. Distinguished Vice President, I have nothing else to add. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, my friend. I now declare the meeting adjourned.